Thank you, Tally Olson. I am back. You are comfortably zoned with me, the Zigzag Man, in Alameda, California, right across the bay from San Francisco, across the moat from Oakland, in the great state of California. And ironically, my two guests are not from California, but they are from the same place. The gateway to Bayonne, Jersey City, New Jersey.
Right.
Joe Dorinson, welcome back to the air, and George Grimm is a fixture not only on the hockey show, but he and I do a lot of shows based on the book we wrote 2 years ago, Comfortably Zoned in Nevada Pine Tar. And I had Joey D from New Jersey, on a while ago, and sent him a copy of the book, and unsolicited, he said some very, very nice things about the book. So I want you, George, to accept his compliments. What did you think of the book, Joe?
I think it's a great read because it's simple and to the point. And what it does, it allows the reader to get into the minds not only of the great players, but the also-rans who deserve a page in history because they tried, even if they didn't succeed to reach the top. And I thought that was important to the readers because we're so invested in superstars and megastars with mega millions that we lose sight of that many of your subjects came up from poverty, from backgrounds of beset with racism, classism, and other isms, and made a mark on society and in their own community. So I love the book. As I said, I read it with relish because I didn't have any mustard left in the house. And I think it's a must-read for anybody who wants to know the heart and soul of American popular culture.
Well,
Thank you very much.
I'm absolutely thrilled as well, George. I have goosebumps, and I'm very appreciative of the words. Off our book a second, we'll segue to a fellow who you wrote about, Joe Dorinson, whose name escapes me.
Paul Robeson.
Paul Robeson.
Yes, I'm all for blunging with your praise. So tell me about Paul Robeson. You wrote about him. Tell me the history of what made him such an interesting character that you decided to write about.
Right. Well, I grew up in a family of union organizers and radicals. My father, who fought in World War I, left the service and became a boxer and joined the IWW, which was the Wobblies, the International Workers of the World. They wanted to change the world and bring justice to the lower classes. And that's what brought me to Robeson. Robeson was marginalized because of his political affiliations. He never joined the Communist Party, but he was very pro-Soviet and was blinded perhaps to Stalin's crimes And I don't apologize for him because I understand the context in which he grew up. Even though he was the most famous black artist in America, he was subjected to Jim Crow laws and other forms of discrimination. So in the 1920s, after making his mark as one of the greatest football players of his era, playing both ways at ends, he probably was the first prototypical tight end. He would catch the ball and run for large yardage. He was also a linebacker and a tackle on defense. And in order to make the Rutgers team in 1915, he was subjected to a hazing in which his knuckles were actually fractured. But during a practice, he was so furious, he picked up one of the running backs and he was ready to throw him to the ground when his coach, Forster, called timeout and he said, "Robeson, you made the team." And he put Rutgers on the map. Rutgers was a cow college, basically servicing agricultural workers, and he was only the third black to attend Rutgers. And he was a four-letter man, like Jackie Robinson. His best sport was football, but he also played baseball. He played shortstop in high school and catcher in college. He played basketball both at Rutgers and also in Harlem. After he graduated, he played semi-professional basketball. And, of course, he threw the discus, and he was a track and field man. So he was a four-letter man at Rutgers. And he went to Columbia Law School, where he did excellent work. But when situated in a law firm, his white secretary said, "I don't take dictation from," and she used the N-word. So he realized that his life as a lawyer was going to be shaped by discrimination and marked by hatred. So he decided with his wife, whom he met at Columbia when he was in law school, she was in the chemistry department, one of the first black women to get a master's degree at Columbia, my alma mater. And she decided to encourage him to become an actor. And before you could say Jackie Robinson stole second base and Paul Robeson scored a touchdown, he became a singer as / actor. And instead of singing opera, which his voice was capable of doing, he began to sing Negro spirituals and folk songs. And then, of course, he went to England as an exile, and there he became lionized, and he learned for the first time that he was respected as an artist. And so he acted in several Eugene O'Neill plays, both in England and back in the United States, and gained notoriety and fame. And he became a national star in the film Showboat, in which he sang in his incomparable voice, which one of the Times critics called a voice that breaks your heart with beauty. And he sang Old Man River, which became his signature song, and he changed the lyrics, eliminating some of the stereotypes and the degrading references and to darkies and nigger. And he made it an anthem of social justice. Now, the problem with Robeson is that he, in the 30s, he went to Spain to sing for the loyalist troops and against the fascists in that famous or infamous Civil War. And he became so enamored of the political causes that he said, an artist must get involved. Now, here was a man who actually was fluent in 12 languages, and he could sing in all 12. And while in Germany, he saw what fascism was in the early 30s. And then he went to the Soviet Union, he saw a contrast. And I guess he was smitten by the Soviet Union. He sent his son, Paul Jr., to study there, and he became fluent in Russian and later worked as a translator. Now, he came back to the United States around 1939, and he was on CBS, and he sang The Ballad for Americans, which is written by Earl Robinson, and I believe Jean Latouche, the lyricist, and it was performed in front of a live audience that CBS hosted, and he got a 15-minute standing ovation. So at that time, Paul Robeson was probably the most famous African-American. And in 1943, he became Othello, opposite Mary Urey, with whom he had an affair. But that's a story for another time. And he won an award, a kind of precursor to the Tony Award. And so he was so famous that a delegation of black activists visited the baseball commissioner, Judge Landis, and they pleaded with him to open the gates so that black athletes like Jackie Robinson could be allowed to play in integrated baseball. And Landis was very deferential. Oh, Mr. Robeson, your fame precedes you. I'm not a racist. I'm doing everything I can if we find the right person. Baloney. He was committed to the racial segregation barriers because Bill Veeck, as in Rec, wanted to buy the Philadelphia Phillies and stocked the team with the great stars of the Negro Leagues, from which Jackie Robinson emerged in 1946. He played for the Kansas City Monarchs. So here is the conflict that I focus on in my book. Robinson became the second most popular person in America, according to a poll. In 1947, the first one was Bing Crosby. And so Robinson was brought to the House Un-American Activities Committee in 1949 to attack Robeson's stand, because Robeson had said earlier in February of 49 in Paris at a peace conference that black soldiers who were so often victimized by segregation that they couldn't even fight in the same battalions as white soldiers. And in fact, in World War I, they were the most decorated American soldiers because they fought with the French. And they got the Croix de Guerre, the highest decoration in the French military. So here is the setup. Robeson was marginalized by the national press as pro-communist. Robinson was asked to attack Robeson, which he did, but he qualified it. And so Robinson was a hero in the white press, but in the black press, the Amsterdam News and the Pittsburgh Courier and other black newspapers, they said, wait a minute, Jackie, you're a novice. Paul's a veteran. And there were cartoons showing them in different positions with Robeson more popular in the black press. Well, years later, after Robinson learned that he never had it made, the title of his book, he said, going back in time, if I had known in 1949 what I know now, which was 1970 when he started writing his last memoir, I would never attack Paul Robeson because he gave up his life, his career, to serve his people, our people. So I know that I was a black man in a white world and I never had it made. And so that was the reconciliation with the two giants of African American culture. And it's interesting, Paul Robeson Jr. told me he came to a conference that I hosted at LRU honoring Jackie, and he said, my father and I went to Ebbets Field, and I begged my father, I said, Dad, you're so famous, Jackie, get me his autograph. And Robeson said, no, Paulie, he called him, and he said, I don't want to embarrass Jackie. He's gotten to the top, and I may be a bête noire for him. And so he restrained himself. But eventually there was this reconciliation of the two polar opposites in 1949. Now, Robeson was not even voted into the Rutgers Football Hall of Fame until after his death. He was a pariah. Now, however, after I wrote my book along with other biographies, and after the celebration which I hosted at LRU in 1998, Robeson's name is now on different buildings at Rutgers and is also on a street named in his honor. So it reminds me of a famous and favorite quote from Leo Tolstoy, the great Russian novelist. God sees the truth, but waits. Unfortunately for Robeson, God waited too long to acknowledge his enormous contributions to American art, music, sports, and, of course, theater.
Joseph, let me ask one question before I turn it over to George. What is the one thing in your research and getting to know Robeson that you were most surprised about?
Well, let me say that I met Robeson when I was 10 years old. We were picketing Borough City Hall. I was with my mother, who was an activist. Because of that activism, Mayor Hay got rid of her and my father. And I felt threatened because there was a counter demonstration, and Robeson appeared, this giant bear of a man in a beautiful blue coat. And I felt, with this man on our side, we're protected. And then I went to this Camp Kinderland, which has many adherents in California. Transported New Yorkers and people from Jersey went to this very left-leaning camp, and he came along with W.E.B. Du Bois. So I learned about Black culture and Black heroes early in my life, and I began to identify with the underdog as a Jew, as a lefty, as a person who knew what Jim Crow was all about. I felt that Robeson deserved the kind of recognition that he was denied because of his infatuation with the Soviet Union. I want to add one more thing. In 1949, Robeson went back to Soviet Union and fortified with information that Stalin was beginning his purge against Jewish intellectuals, including writers and poets who lionized Stalin during World War II, including one man named Itzhak Pfeffer. And Robeson demanded that Stalin and the NKVD, which was the secret police, bring Pfeffer from his prison in Moscow to his hotel room. And Itzhak Pfeffer came, and he put his hand over his mouth, indicating that they're being bugged and that he could not speak freely. And he pointed to the floor where wires were stretched to listen into their conversation. And then he put his finger across his neck, indicating that he was going to be killed. And that happened. But Robeson, shortly after that meeting, came to the great orchestra a concert hall, and he sang a Yiddish song dedicated to his friend Itzik Pfeffer. It was in Yiddish, it's Zognet Kemel aus der Geistem letzten Weg. Never say your road is ending. It's a song that was sung by the rebels in the Warsaw Ghetto and other ghettos, proving that the Jews did fight back, contrary to the myth that they went to the slaughter like lambs, which is something I believed in for a long time until I began to do research and learned the contrary was true, that many of these myths were perpetrated by Nazi propaganda. And so what Robeson did is he allied himself with the Itzik Pfeffer, and he's been criticized for not doing more, and maybe justly so, but he did have a guilty sense. So many years later, when his passport was restored in 1959, he visited the Soviet Union. This time Khrushchev was in charge. And he said to Mr. Khrushchev, my friends in America are worrying that Jews have been once again made scapegoats. And Khrushchev told Robeson, keep your nose out of our business, which was a trope, an anti-Semitic trope, because the nose was often identified, the big nose, with the Jewish population. And Robeson had a major nervous breakdown. And there are multiple theories about it. His son argued that the CIA came to an event and put LSD in his drink, and it sent him off into a major breakdown. Others have said that, including his former mistress, Uta Hagen, the great actress, that already in the 40s, Robeson had a streak of paranoia, maybe brought on by years of threats and bad experiences along the road to glory. So anyway, I don't want to dominate this discussion. It seems like you wind us up, professors, and we talk indefinitely. So I'd love to hear some of your takes on Robeson and Robinson and other figures who made a difference, who stood up both as athletes and maybe as public figures.
Well, my take is the amazing resemblance in Jackie and Paul's life, athletic skills and domination in so many different sports. Robeson, as well, in the theater and in cultural things that Jackie wasn't involved in. But they shared a lot. Jackie was a rebel stood up to a lieutenant and even got court-martialed. So they had basically the same personality in a lot of ways.
I want to piggyback with what you just said. Robeson was pulled up before the House Un-American Activities Committee after Jackie's presentation, and the head of the committee said, Mr. Robeson, if you love the Soviet Union so much, why don't you leave our country and go there? And he replied, I think it was Representative Walter from Pennsylvania, he said, I built this country. My people bled and sweated and built this country, and I won't let any fascist tell me where to go and where to live. And Eric Bentley, a prominent author, my teacher at Columbia in comparative literature, wrote a book in which he made Robeson's speech, the centerpiece of that book, about fighting back against the blacklist, the Red Scare, and the attempt to silence the marginal voices of people crying out for social justice. So Robeson, and one final point, in 1949, before this episode of Cold War revenge, Robeson was earning $100,000 a year. After that speech by his detractors, including Robinson, he couldn't get bookings anywhere, and he was reduced to $3,000 a year. And his passport was denied for 8 years. So the people in Canada wanted him to perform, and he couldn't leave. So what he did was he went to Niagara Falls, and he, with a bullhorn, he was able to project his sonorous, beautiful voice that broke your heart with beauty, and he received the accolades and the applause and the cheers across the river, and he was appreciated globally. He went to China and was even after maybe because the communists took power, and he sang their national anthem in fluent Chinese. So he felt that he was an international force for peace, and his son made this observation, which I think merits attention. He said that thanks to Robeson speaking out about certain soldiers, black soldiers who wouldn't fight against the Soviet Union, he said there were, and he apparently in translating some scientific documents, there was a kind of alert, a nuclear alert. Both sides were almost, not unlike what's happening in Ukraine today, on the brink of nuclear escalation. And Robeson's stand might have put kibosh on that scenario. So that's worth considering, that sometimes you lose the battle but win the war. And it prefigures what many people like me did during the Vietnam War. We protested. We thought it was an unjust war that we couldn't win. And it turns out that we were correct in the long run. As part
Absolutely.
of the 60s. In fact, in your neck of the woods, I was in Berkeley in 1964, and I sensed what was going on in Spruill Hall in the University of California, Berkeley, and thereabouts.
Right, you're correct. I live right down the road from Berkeley in a little city called Alameda, a big town. And do you get out to visit every now and again?
Well, the last time I was visiting a 98-year-old cousin who lived across the bay, and unfortunately passed away. He was a much beloved doctor, and it's funny. His name was it was actually Saul Dorinson, but he preferred his middle name, Malvern. And he was a wonderful man. We didn't always agree on politics. He was more conservative, but he appreciated the kind of action that was going on. He had 5 children. All of them went to the UC. He had a nephew who was an officer in Vietnam, but came back totally disenchanted and became an anti-war activist. So, I thought that, and of course, what's the name of that rebel leader of the Berkeley uprising? He came from New York. I think he was an Italian guy, and I can't remember his name, but he was quite a character. Do you know who I'm talking about? He was a bartender.
Yeah, I can't think of his name though. Yeah, there was. Back then we had a lot of leaders like that. Jerry Rubin, all those guys. I just think who you're thinking of.
Oh yeah, I remember Jerry Rubin, and I also worked with your state. What is he? State senator Tom Hayden. I was teaching in Newark. Right. I was teaching Newark State, which is in Union, New Jersey. My first full-time teaching job, and Tom Hayden was organizing blacks and whites as well in Newark, and he asked for help, and I would go with some of my colleagues and friends, and I remember the Herald Tribune then was still operating, and they sent a reporter, and somewhere in my files I have a picture of Tom Hayden and my friends gathered around talking strategy. And we were trying to get a black man elected mayor of Newark. We failed. But, we tried to get him elected to Congress. We failed. But he made a comeback and he became mayor of Newark, Kenneth Gibson. So Gibson got help from Tom Hayden, and Tom Hayden was quite a character. He was at the Columbia student riots in 1968, and of course he married Jane Fonda.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Yeah.
So he got around. He was quite charismatic, but he never reached the political power that he yearned for. Anyway, you have to be, I think, complimented for another reason. You did something that was contrary to your interest. I'll give you an example. In your book, you have a wonderful profile of Marvin Miller. And it struck me that was contrary, Ralph, to your interest, because you were a TOPS representative. And what Miller did was destroyed the golden egg that you probably benefited from. He's the one who decided that TOPS was a monopoly. And he sued TOPS, and he allowed other companies to get involved in the baseball card business. Credit to you. But also cash was lost in the process.
Well, I was doing the TOPS thing, as I call it. I would go to minor league teams that had players on the way to the major league, and I was doing it for about 5, 6, 7 years. And it was the whole union thing wasn't spoken about, and all of a sudden it changed TOPS, and it was good for baseball, good for the players. The players could share in the royalties, which were thousands of dollars, and they were being offered each year a refrigerator or lawn apparel, stuff like that, from a catalog as payments. And it instantly turned to players in my day, in the 80s and 90s, making $85,000 a year just in royalties from TOPS. And
before that, they signed a contract for $125, and it was a lifetime contract. So Miller upset the apple cart and probably marred your business plan. But you did the right thing by celebrating this man. I had opportunity to share a podium with Marvin Miller in New York, and I pleaded with the powers that be. This is a man who deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. and it was premature. Everyone at that event agreed, but Major League Baseball waited until he died to posthumously honor this man who was the Moses, if you will, of modern baseball.
Absolutely. But some still look at that transformation of how baseball was when owners literally own the rights to players for their lifetime.
Right.
And
indentured servitude.
Right. And just because their pay scale was a little bit higher than the average Joe, didn't make it any better. Because we see with entertainment and the way sports are today, that you deserve what they pay you. If they want to pay you that, you deserve it. They're obviously making buku bucks that they can pay you. And it's all come out. The books have been opened, and it's changed. How has it changed things for the worse in the baseball culture, George Grimm? Just your thinking.
Baseball is just not the same as it used to be. It's just not enjoyable to watch. I can't stand the new rules about starting extra innings with a man on second. The new rule that a pitcher can't throw over first base more than twice. They made the bases bigger, so it's easier to steal. The poor catcher, he's really screwed now because after the guy throws over to first base, twice, that guy's going to go, and it's up to the catcher to get him in second base. And the actual skill of the play is, everybody's trying to hit home run. No one's trying to move the batter, the runner to the next base. I mean, and the pitches are all power pitches. I mean, somebody like Whitey Ford would just never last in Major League Baseball today because he didn't have that kind of an arm. He used to pick those spots. And one of my biggest things about baseball is that the players look very sloppy. I mean, you've got guys who look like they're going to fall over their pants, and you got other guys who have their pants up to their knees. Some of them are showing white on their socks. Some of them are not. It's just you say uniform. Well, a uniform is a uniform. It means it's the same. It's not, and it's just not very pleasant to watch anymore. And as far as speeding up the game, that's fine, but you can't change the content of the game, the little nuances of the game, and that's what they did. And it's a shame.
I agree with most of what you said. I'm not so sure I agree with you on the uniform, but the idea of changing the rules to speed up the game, expressing the home run ball as opposed to bunting and hitting runs, and I just it sticks in my craw. I may be liberal in politics, but I'm conservative in sports. I like to see tradition maintained. I'd like to see a game that, when you think of it, there was a Dodger pitcher, I think in 1922, who pitched a complete game of 26 innings in a tie. I think it was the longest game on record. A 1-1 tie. The Dodgers, I think his name was Cador. And he pitched the entire game against the Boston Braves. And then also this movement of franchises. You're going to lose a team from Oakland who's moving to Las Vegas, another crapshoot. And I think that to be is given what I was reading about Walter O'Malley in your book and his dispute with Ricky and Robinson, O'Malley got Horace Stoneham drunk, and because Stoneham apparently wanted to move the team, the Giants, from the Polo Grounds and Harlem to Minneapolis, where he had a major farm team. And O'Malley, who already had a roadmap to L.A., said, got him inebriated and said, "Why don't you come with me to California?" And that's how you in California benefited, Ralph. But we in New York took a beating, because if you think about, and you addressed that in your book, this wonderful period, the glory days of New York City baseball, where you say it seemed like every year there was a New York team in the World Series, and it was the mecca of baseball. And I growing up in Brooklyn, you could walk from one block to another and hear Red Barber, Connie Desmond, and later Vince Scully on the radio, and you knew the score and you knew the people were involved. You don't see that. You don't hear that anymore. There's an alienation that is not only prevalent in society because of the way our economy is, but it's also because our traditional sports have become so corporatized and capitalized that it's all about money. The idea of speeding up the game, which is traditionally a country game, a game where you run the bases to get home, and now they want to get home to their apartments and their houses in record time. And I'll give you one example. I went to Yankee Stadium hoping to see A-Rod hit his 600th home run. And I was rewarded because I was there the first inning, and he did it in the first inning. These people came in, about several thousand people came into the third inning. We used to watch batting practice. We used to go on the field, talk to players, get autographs. It's so different now. It's become, a very impersonal kind of sport. Even, the autographs. I remember when I was able to attract some of the greatest players in the country to Brooklyn. In 1997, I got Bob Feller, Warren Spahn, Tommy Henrik, my favorite Yankee, Joe Black, Stan Musial, Bobby Bragan, and then I got great Ozzie Smith, the Wizard of Oz. I got the other great base stealer from the Cardinals, Lou Brock. They all came. Why did they come? Well, they were given a deal. They could come to a card show and make megabucks, but part of their obligation was to come to the conference. So I benefited. But, during an intermission, about 400 fans in the audience stormed the dais and they wanted autographs because it was part of, the give me culture. I was embarrassed. I did get autographs, but I had them put not on blank pieces of paper. I took my book, the baseball book, and one that I wrote, and they autographed that. And I'm not going to trade it. I'm not going to sell it. I'm not going to go to a card show. This is going to be part of my legacy to my children and grandchildren. But
hey, Joe, you have something in common with both of us that you don't realize. You're a Walter Mitty kind of guy.
Yes.
And I say that with great reverence. You really have a passion for the game, for life, and we thank you both. We thank you for being here and for acknowledging the book. That you like it is icing on the cake. Just that you got through it. It's an honor that you did.
I have one criticism. I hope this doesn't sound nitpicking. But on page 160, your interviewee identifies Don Drysdale as a rookie pitcher in 1959. I couldn't resist mentioning it. He was a rookie in 1955. Just check it out. And in the next version,
I know. He was an original Brooklyn Dodger along with Sandy Koufax.
Right.
And that's an error. But to error is human. To forgive divine.
You're right.
And thank you for calling it to our attention. It means you read it. You didn't just skim it.
There was also one other thing, and I can't find the page. One of your interviewees said that DiMaggio hit more home runs than strikeouts. Not true. It was close. 369 strikeouts, 361 home runs. But it shows you, I read the book. I love the book. And I can't resist the red pencil as a former professor trying to get a perfect. And by the way, my book has errors too.
Well, it's an honor to be edited by you. Thank you very much.
Exactly. Wow. This has been a terrific interview. Promise you'll come back and kibitz with us again. Sure.
I love to, and I want to thank you for maintaining such a great tradition. I never knew what a podcast was until very, very recently, but you perfected the form, and bless you both for writing a book based on your interviews. They read like you were there, almost at the point of action. And you remind me of one of your interviewers, Peter Goldenbach, who has such a gift to take an interview and turn it into literature. So keep it going. And write a sequel.
Reading a sequel at this point in our lives would be an accomplishment. Thank you, my friend. Come back to George. Anything you want to say in closing?
No, just thank you very much for being on with us. It was a real honor to be able to talk to you and listen to your stories about Paul Robeson. A lot of stuff I didn't know. I think I picked up his life when he sang. I didn't know anything about his sports background. So that was. And I thank you very much.
In my recent book, The Black Athlete is a Hero, I have a large section on Robeson as athlete, and he was one of the first stars in professional football.
Right.
So anyway, keep it going.
Thank you, sir.
Joy to be part of it.
Just promise to come back often and soon.
Okay, thank you.
Well, soon and often if you really want to turn things around. Stay healthy, gentlemen. Thank you, George Grimm.
Thank you.
Joseph Joey D. Dorinson. I'll always remember your first nickname. Be well, gentlemen, and thank you for listening. Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. I'm Ralph Tyko, the weak link of it all. Be well, and Zig Tyko, everybody.
Good job.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Ralph.